8-year-old's testimony destroys corrupt cops. Her words will give you chills. Emma Martinez was just trying to be kind to what she thought was a hungry dog. But her innocent act of compassion was about to become the thread that unraveled one of the most shocking police corruption cases in federal history. When this brave little girl took the witness stand, she didn't just tell her story. She delivered justice with the pure honesty that only a child can bring to a world full of lies and corruption. "I know you," Emma called out in the packed federal courtroom, recognizing the German shepherd she'd been feeding for months. "You're my guardian dog." What seemed like a simple case of mistaken identity was actually the key that would unlock a conspiracy involving corrupt officers, death threats against a federal judge's family, and an unauthorized protection detail that had been operating in the shadows to keep an innocent child safe. This is the story of how one 8-year-old girl's love for animals helped bring down dangerous criminals and restore faith in the justice system. The first rays of sunlight painted Emma Martinez's bedroom wall in golden hues as her alarm clock chirped its familiar tune. But Emma was already wide awake, sitting cross-legged on her bed with her dark hair still tousled from sleep, clutching her favorite stuffed teddy bear, Mr. Buttons, against her chest. Today wasn't just any ordinary Wednesday, it was Bring Your Child to Work Day, and for the first time in her 8 years of life, she would finally see where her daddy worked. "Daddy! Daddy!" Emma's bare feet pattered against the hardwood floors as she raced down the hallway, her pink polka-dot pajamas flowing behind her like a superhero cape. She burst through the kitchen doorway to find Judge Roberto Martinez already dressed in his crisp black robes, sipping coffee and reading through a stack of important-looking papers. His stern morning concentration melted into a warm smile the moment he saw his daughter's excited face. "Well, good morning, mi niña," he said, setting down his coffee mug and opening his arms wide. Emma launched herself into his embrace, breathing in the familiar scent of his aftershave mixed with the coffee that seemed to follow him everywhere. "Is today really the day, Daddy? Am I really going to see your courthouse? The big one with the tall columns like in the pictures?" Emma's words tumbled out in a breathless rush, her dark eyes sparkling with anticipation. "Yes, Emma, today is really the day," Judge Martinez chuckled, smoothing down his daughter's unruly hair. "But remember what we talked about? There are very important rules in Daddy's courthouse that you'll need to follow." Emma nodded solemnly, suddenly serious, as she tried to remember all the rules her father had explained to her over the past week. "I have to be very, very quiet, like a little mouse. I can't talk unless someone talks to me first, and I have to sit still in the special seat you made for me." "That's right, sweetheart. And do you remember why these rules are so important?" Emma scrunched up her nose, thinking hard. "Because you're a judge, and judges have to listen to people tell their stories so they can decide what's fair and what's not fair, and if I'm noisy, you might miss something important." Judge Martinez felt his heart swell with pride. Even at 8 years old, Emma had an intuitive understanding of justice that amazed him. "Exactly right. You see, Emma, in my courtroom, I have to help people solve very big problems. Sometimes, people make bad choices, and it's my job to decide what should happen to help make things right again." As they settled down for breakfast, Emma's favorite blueberry pancakes that her mother, Dr. Sophia Martinez, had prepared before leaving for her early morning shift at the hospital, Emma's questions began in earnest. "Daddy, how do you know who the good guys are and who the bad guys are?" she asked, carefully cutting her pancakes into perfect squares just the way she liked them. Judge Martinez paused, his fork halfway to his mouth. This was exactly the kind of question he'd been expecting, but it never got easier to answer. How do you explain to an 8-year-old that the world isn't divided into simple categories of heroes and villains? "Well, mi amor, that's one of the most important questions a judge has to answer every day. You see, people aren't always just good or just bad. Sometimes good people make mistakes, And sometimes people who do bad things might have reasons that are very sad or complicated. Emma tilted her head, processing this information. Like when Tommy Morrison at school pushed Sarah, but it was because the bigger kids were being mean to him first? Exactly like that, her father said, impressed by her ability to grasp such complex concepts. My job is to listen to everyone's story. The people who say they were hurt, the people who are accused of doing something wrong, and all the witnesses who saw what happened. Then I have to decide what's fair for everyone. But what if the bad guys lie? Emma asked, her voice dropping to a whisper, as if she were sharing a secret. That's why we have something called evidence. Proof that helps us know what really happened. And that's why I have to be very careful to listen to everything and be fair to everyone, even when it's hard. Emma nodded thoughtfully, then brightened. Will I see any real bad guys today? Well, there will be people in my courtroom today who are accused of doing some very wrong things. But remember, Emma, until a jury decides, we have to treat everyone fairly. That's what justice means, giving everyone a fair chance to tell their story. After breakfast, Emma raced upstairs to get dressed, her mind buzzing with excitement and nervous energy. She carefully selected her best dress, her shiniest black shoes. As she brushed her teeth, she practiced being courthouse quiet in the mirror, covering her mouth with her hand and whispering, "I will be the best courthouse visitor ever." Back in her room, Emma packed her special courthouse bag with all the essentials. Her beloved Mr. Buttons, because even big girls sometimes needed their teddy bears. Her favorite coloring books, a fresh pack of crayons, and the small notebook her father had given her to draw pictures of anything interesting she might see. She also slipped in a granola bar, just in case the courthouse didn't have snacks. "Are you ready, Emma?" her father called from downstairs. "Almost," Emma called back, taking one last look in her mirror. She practiced her most grown-up smile and whispered to her reflection, "Today I'm going to see where Daddy makes sure everyone gets treated fairly. Maybe I'll even help catch some bad guys." She grabbed her bag and Mr. Buttons and headed downstairs where her father was waiting by the door, his judge's robes replaced by a crisp navy suit and his favorite red tie, the one Emma had helped him pick out for Father's Day. "You look very professional, Miss Martinez," he said with a formal bow that made Emma giggle. "And you look like the most important judge in the whole world, Daddy," she replied, slipping her small hand into his larger one. As they stepped out into the crisp morning air, Emma looked up at her father with absolute trust and admiration. She had no idea that by the end of this day her innocent presence would help expose a dangerous conspiracy that threatened everything her father stood for. All she knew was that she was about to spend the day with her hero, learning about justice and fairness in the place where her daddy worked to make the world a better place. The federal courthouse rose before Emma like a massive stone castle from one of her fairy tale books, its towering columns reaching toward the sky like giant fingers supporting the heavens. Her small hand tightened around her father's as she tilted her head back, trying to see the very top of the imposing building that seemed to stretch on forever. "Wow," she breathed, her voice barely a whisper. "It's even bigger than in the pictures, Daddy. It's like a palace for judges." Judge Martinez smiled down at his daughter's wonder-struck expression. He'd walked up these same steps thousands of times over the past 12 years, but seeing the courthouse through Emma's eyes reminded him of the first time he'd approached this building as a young lawyer, filled with dreams of making a difference in the world. It is pretty impressive, isn't it? This building is over 100 years old, Emma. Can you imagine how many important decisions have been made inside these walls? Emma's eyes grew wide as she counted on her fingers. That's older than Abuela. Steps. Emma noticed the intricate carvings in the stone pillars. Eagles with outstretched wings, scales balanced perfectly, and stern-faced figures that seemed to be watching everyone who entered. "Daddy, why do those stone people look so serious?" "Those are symbols of justice, mi amor. The serious faces remind everyone who comes here that this is a place where very important decisions are made. The scales represent fairness, making sure both sides of every story are weighed equally." The heavy bronze doors opened with a deep, echoing groan that made Emma jump slightly. Inside, the lobby stretched out like a cathedral, with polished marble floors that reflected the morning light streaming through tall, stained glass windows. Emma's shoes clicked and echoed with each step, creating a rhythm that seemed to bounce off the walls and ceiling. "Judge Martinez," called a cheerful voice. A security guard with kind eyes and graying temples approached them with a genuine smile. "And this must be the famous Emma we've been hearing so much about." Emma looked up at her father uncertainly. She wasn't used to strangers knowing her name. "Emma, this is Officer Williams. He helps keep everyone safe in the courthouse," her father explained. "Officer Williams, this is my daughter Emma. She's going to be observing in court today." Officer Williams knelt down to Emma's eye level, his voice warm and friendly. "Well, Miss Emma, we're very honored to have such an important visitor today. Now, I'm going to need to check your bag, just like we do for everyone who comes into the courthouse. It's like a game where we make sure everyone is safe. Is that okay with you?" Emma nodded seriously and handed over her backpack. She watched with fascination as Officer Williams carefully examined her coloring books, crayons, and Mr. Buttons. When he picked up her teddy bear, Emma quickly explained, "That's Mr. Buttons. He's my special friend. And he's never been in a courthouse before either. He might be a little nervous." Officer Williams nodded gravely as he inspected Mr. Buttons. "Well, Mr. Buttons looks like a very trustworthy bear to me. I think he'll do just fine in court. Just make sure he knows the rules about being quiet, okay?" "Oh, I already told him all the rules," Emma assured him seriously. "He's a very good listener." After passing through the metal detector, which Emma found both scary and exciting, they made their way toward the elevators. As they walked through the bustling lobby, Emma noticed how everyone seemed to know her father. Lawyers nodded respectfully, court clerks waved and smiled, and several people stopped to shake his hand. "Judge Martinez," called a woman with silver hair pulled back in an elegant bun, approaching them with a warm smile. Behind wire-rimmed glasses and laugh lines that suggested she smiled often. She wore a crisp uniform with a shiny badge, and Emma was immediately impressed by how official and important she looked. "I'm 8 years old," Emma announced, extending her hand for a grown-up handshake just like her father had taught her. 8 years old, my goodness. That's a very grown-up age, Mrs. Chen said, shaking Emma's hand seriously. "I have a granddaughter who's 8, and she's one of the smartest people I know. I have a feeling you and I are going to be great friends today." As they rode the elevator to the 4th floor, Mrs. Chen explained her job in terms Emma could understand. "You know how your daddy is the judge, which means he's like the captain of a ship. Well, I'm like his first mate. I help make sure everything runs smoothly in the courtroom. I keep track of all the evidence, I make sure everyone follows the rules, and I help people find their seats." "Like a teacher, but for grown-ups?" Emma asked. "Exactly like that," Mrs. Chen laughed. "And today my most important job will be taking care of you and making sure you have everything you need." The elevator dinged softly as they reached the 4th floor, and Emma stepped out into a hallway that seemed to buzz with quiet energy. People in dark suits walked purposefully back and forth, carrying briefcases and stacks of papers. Some spoke in hushed, urgent tones, while others sat on wooden benches, looking nervous or worried. As they walked toward her father's courtroom, Emma couldn't help but overhear snippets of conversation from the adults around them. The words were mostly too big for her to understand, but she caught enough to know that something very serious was happening. Corruption charges are serious. If they convict these officers, Judge's family could be in danger. Never seen anything like this case. Emma looked up at her father, but his expression had shifted into what she privately called his judge face. Serious, focused, and a little bit scary, even though she knew he was still the same loving daddy underneath. "Daddy," she whispered, tugging gently on his sleeve, "are the police officers in trouble today, the really bad kind of bad guys?" Judge Martinez paused in the hallway, kneeling down to meet his daughter's concerned gaze. Around them, the courthouse continued its busy rhythm, but for a moment, it was just the two of them. "Emma, today we're going to hear about some police officers who are accused of doing things that police officers should never do. Some people say they took money they weren't supposed to take, and that they didn't protect people the way police officers are supposed to." Emma's brow furrowed as she processed this information. In her 8-year-old world, police officers were heroes. They helped lost children find their parents, they kept the neighborhood safe, and they visited her school to teach kids about safety. The idea that some police officers might be bad guys was almost too complicated to understand. "But if they're police officers, doesn't that mean they're supposed to be good guys?" she asked. "That's exactly right, sweetheart. Police officers are supposed to protect and help people. That's why when police officers do bad things, it's extra serious. It's my job to listen to all the evidence and help decide what's true and what should happen next." Mrs. Chen, who had been listening quietly, added gently, "Emma, your daddy is one of the fairest judges in this whole courthouse. Even when cases are complicated and scary, he always makes sure everyone gets treated fairly. That's what makes him so special." Emma nodded, feeling a surge of pride for her father, mixed with a new understanding that his job was even more important and difficult than she had realized. As they approached the heavy wooden doors of courtroom 4A, she squeezed Mr. Buttons a little tighter and whispered to him, "We're going to see Daddy be a real hero today." The courtroom doors opened with a soft whoosh, and Emma stepped into a space that took her breath away. It was like entering a cathedral dedicated to justice, with rich, dark wood paneling that gleamed under soft lighting, rows of polished benches arranged like church pews, and her father's judge's bench elevated at the front like a throne for a wise king. "Oh my," Emma whispered, her voice echoing slightly in the vast space. "It's even more beautiful than I imagined." Mrs. Chen guided Emma to a special seat in the front row of the gallery, the area where people could sit and watch the proceedings. Her father had arranged for a small, cushioned booster seat, so Emma could see everything clearly, and Mrs. Chen had prepared a special little table beside her chair, where she could spread out her coloring supplies. "This is your command center for the day," Mrs. Chen said with a smile, helping Emma arrange her coloring books, crayons, and Mr. Buttons. "From here, you'll be able to see everything that happens. But remember, I have to be as quiet as a little mouse," Emma finished, settling into her seat and looking around the courtroom with wide eyes. "Mrs. Chen, where will Daddy sit?" Mrs. Chen pointed to the impressive wooden bench at the front of the courtroom, elevated several feet above everything else. Behind it was a tall, black leather chair and an American flag. "Right up there. That's called the bench, even though it's not really a bench like in a park. When your daddy puts on his black robes and sits up there, He becomes the most important person in this room. Emma watched as various people began filing into the courtroom, lawyers carrying thick briefcases. His job requires him to be very serious and professional. He might not be able to smile at you or wave like he usually does, but that doesn't mean he's not happy you're here. Do you understand? Emma nodded solemnly. She had seen her father in work mode before, during important phone calls at home or when he was reading legal documents in his study. She knew that Judge Daddy was different from regular Daddy, even though they were the same person. A side door opened, and Emma held her breath as her father entered the courtroom. He had changed into his flowing black judicial robes, and suddenly he looked both familiar and like a complete stranger. His face was composed, serious and impartial, as he took his place behind the bench. When his eyes briefly met Emma's, there was just the tiniest hint of a smile, so quick that only she would have noticed it. "All rise," called the court clerk. The Honorable Judge Roberto Martinez presiding. Everyone in the courtroom stood, and Emma quickly scrambled to her feet as well, clutching Mr. Buttons to her chest. She felt incredibly important to be part of this serious grown-up ceremony. "You may be seated," her father's voice rang out clearly through the courtroom. Emma had heard him speak sternly before, but never with this kind of authority. It sent a little shiver of pride and nervousness through her. As people settled back into their seats, Emma got her first real look at the defendants. 3 men in dark suits sat at a table to her right, and something about them made her feel uneasy. They weren't obviously scary like the villains in her movies. They looked like regular grown-ups. But there was something in their eyes, something hard and angry, that made Emma instinctively move closer to Mrs. Chen. "Mrs. Chen," Emma whispered as quietly as she could, "are those the police officers who are in trouble?" Mrs. Chen nodded almost imperceptibly. "Officers Blake, Morrison, and Detective Richards," she whispered back. "Remember, Emma, they haven't been found guilty of anything yet. Your daddy has to listen to everyone's side of the story first." Emma opened her coloring book to a fresh page and began sketching with her crayons. But she found herself drawing the faces she saw in the courtroom, instead of the flowers and rainbows she usually preferred. There was something about Officer Blake's thin, cruel mouth that she wanted to capture, and Detective Richards kept glancing around the courtroom in a way that reminded her of the mean kids at school when they were planning something sneaky. Officer Morrison, the youngest of the 3, looked scared rather than mean, and Emma found herself feeling a little sorry for him. He kept fidgeting with his hands and looking down at the table, and she wondered if maybe he was the kind of person who got talked into doing bad things by meaner people. "The prosecution may proceed with opening statements," her father announced from the bench. A woman in a sharp gray suit stood up and approached a podium facing the jury. Emma watched with fascination as the prosecutor, Mrs. Chen had whispered that her name was Ms. Rodriguez, began to tell a story that sounded like something from a movie, except it was all real. Ms. Rodriguez talked about police officers who were supposed to protect people, but instead took money from drug dealers. She explained how these officers used their badges and guns to scare honest people and protect criminals who paid them enough. Emma didn't understand all the big words, but she understood enough to know that these police officers had broken their promise to help people. What made Emma feel scared and angry was when Ms. Rodriguez mentioned that these bad police officers had even threatened judges and their families to try to escape punishment for their crimes. Emma's hand tightened around her crayon as she realized that meant people like her daddy, and maybe even people like her, could be in danger from bad police officers. As the morning wore on, Emma found herself studying every face in the courtroom. The jury members looked serious and concerned. The prosecutors looked determined and a little bit angry. The defense lawyers looked worried and kept whispering urgently to their clients. But it was the defendants who fascinated and frightened her the most. Throughout the prosecutor's opening statement, Emma watched their reactions. Officer Blake's face never changed expression. He stared straight ahead, with cold, empty eyes that reminded Emma of a snake she'd seen at the zoo. Detective Richards kept taking notes, but Emma could tell he wasn't really writing words. He was just scribbling angrily, his jaw clenched tight. During a brief break, as people stood up and stretched, Emma leaned over to Mrs. Chen. "Mrs. Chen, why would police officers want to be bad guys? Aren't they supposed to protect children and help lost puppies and catch real criminals?" Mrs. Chen's expression was sad as she considered how to answer such an innocent but profound question. "Emma, most police officers are wonderful people who really do want to help and protect everyone. But sometimes, some people become police officers for the wrong reasons, or they start out good but then make bad choices when someone offers them money or power." Emma thought about this as she continued coloring, adding police cars and badges to her drawing, but making sure to draw both good police officers with smiles and kind eyes, and bad ones with frowns and mean expressions. She wanted to remember that there were both kinds, even though it was confusing and scary to think about. When the defense attorney stood up to give his opening statement, Emma noticed how he kept looking at her father with what she could only describe as angry eyes. His voice was polite and professional, but Emma could sense something mean underneath, like when the popular girls at school whispered during another quiet moment, "Does that lawyer not like my daddy?" Mrs. Chen glanced at the defense table and then back at Emma. "Sometimes lawyers get frustrated when they think a case is difficult to win, but your daddy treats everyone fairly, no matter what." As the day continued, Emma began to realize that this wasn't just a story about bad police officers. It was a story about people who were trying to hurt the system that her daddy worked so hard to protect. These weren't just criminals. They were people who had tried to break the very idea of fairness and justice that her father had explained to her over breakfast that morning. Sitting in that courtroom, surrounded by the serious business of justice, Emma felt both smaller and more important than she ever had before. She was just one little girl with a teddy bear and some crayons. But she was also a witness to something momentous, a battle between good and evil that was happening right in front of her. As the afternoon shadows grew longer across the courtroom floor, Emma had no idea that tomorrow would bring a four-legged hero into her life, or that her innocent recognition of that hero would ultimately help her father and the justice system win this battle against corruption and intimidation. For now, she was content to sit quietly, color her pictures of good guys and bad guys, and watch her daddy prove that justice really could prevail, even when the odds seemed frightening and the enemies wore badges they didn't deserve. The late afternoon sun cast long, golden shadows across the Martinez family's front yard as 8-year-old Emma bounced down the front steps, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders. It had been another typical day at Roosevelt Elementary, spelling tests, playground drama with her best friend, Sophia, and cafeteria pizza that tasted like cardboard. But as Emma skipped toward the mailbox to help her mother collect the daily mail, something made her stop dead in her tracks. There, partially hidden behind the large oak tree that separated their property from the Hendersons' next door, stood the most beautiful dog Emma had ever seen. It was a German shepherd with a thick, lustrous coat of black and tan fur that seemed to shimmer in the dappled sunlight. The dog's ears were perked forward alertly, and its intelligent brown eyes were focused directly on her with an intensity that should have been frightening, but somehow felt reassuring instead. "Oh my gosh," Emma whispered, dropping her backpack with a soft thud on the sidewalk. "Are you lost, puppy?" The dog didn't move, but its tail gave a single, almost imperceptible wag, just enough to let Emma know that it had heard her and wasn't afraid. There was something different about this dog, something that set it apart from the neighborhood pets. She was like a four-legged soldier. Emma took a careful step forward, her hand extended, palm up, in the universal gesture of friendship her father had taught her, for approaching unknown animals. "It's okay, beautiful dog, I won't hurt you. Do you have a family? Are you hungry?" The German Shepherd remained motionless for several heartbeats, studying Emma with those wise, soulful eyes. Then, as if making a decision, it took one step forward, not close enough to touch, but close enough to show Emma that it trusted her, at least a little bit. "Emma, what are you doing out there?" Dr. Sofia Martinez called from the front porch. Wiping her hands on a kitchen towel, she had just gotten home from her shift at the hospital and was still wearing her scrubs under a light cardigan. "Mama, come see. There's the most beautiful dog here, and I think it might be lost," Emma called back, never taking her eyes off her new friend. By the time Dr. Martinez reached the sidewalk, the German Shepherd had melted back into the shadows behind the oak tree, leaving no trace of its presence, except for Emma's excited chatter and pointing. "Emma, mi amor, I don't see any dog. Are you sure you weren't just seeing shadows through the trees?" Emma's face fell as she looked back toward the oak tree, finding nothing but empty space and dappled sunlight. "But Mama, it was right there. It was big and beautiful with black and brown fur, and it had the nicest eyes, like it was really smart and wanted to be my friend." Dr. Martinez smiled indulgently and ruffled her daughter's hair. "You have such a wonderful imagination, sweetheart. Maybe it was one of the Henderson's cats playing tricks on you, or a shadow that looked like a dog. Come on, let's go inside. I'm making your favorite chicken enchiladas for dinner." But Emma knew what she had seen. As they walked back toward the house, she turned for one last look over her shoulder and caught just a glimpse of movement in the shadows, a flash of tan and black fur and the glint of watchful eyes before it disappeared completely. That night at dinner, Emma regaled her parents with detailed descriptions of her mysterious canine visitor. Judge Martinez listened with the same indulgent smile as his wife, asking gentle questions that showed he was taking Emma's story seriously, even if he didn't quite believe it. "What kind of dog did it look like, mi niña?" "Like the police dogs on TV, Daddy. Really big and strong, with pointy ears and a fluffy tail, and it was wearing a collar, so I know it belongs to someone. Maybe it's a police dog." "Police dogs are working dogs, Emma. They don't just wander around neighborhoods by themselves," her mother explained gently. "They stay with their handlers and have very important jobs to do." But Emma wasn't deterred. Over the next several days, she made it her mission to see her mysterious friend again. She began leaving small offerings by the oak tree, pieces of leftover chicken from dinner, dog biscuits, so she convinced her mother to buy, just in case, and fresh water in a small bowl she borrowed from the kitchen. Every morning before school, and every afternoon when she came home, Emma would check her offerings, and every single day they were gone, not scattered by squirrels or wind, but cleanly consumed, as if by a grateful and well-trained animal. "Emma, stop leaving food outside," her mother scolded gently after discovering the empty bowl for the third day in a row. "You're going to attract raccoons or possums, and we don't want wild animals thinking our yard is a restaurant." "But Mama, what if my dog friend is hungry? What if it doesn't have anyone to take care of it?" Dr. Martinez sat down next to her daughter on the front porch steps, pulling Emma close to her side. "Sweetheart, if there really is a dog coming around here, it's probably not lost. Dogs are very good at taking care of themselves, and if it was truly in trouble, it would probably come up to us for help, instead of hiding." Emma wanted to argue, but something in her mother's tone told her that the conversation was over. However, that didn't stop her from continuing her vigil. She began positioning herself by her bedroom window each evening after homework, watching the yard as the sun set and shadows grew long. It was during one of these evening watches that Emma finally saw her friend again. The German shepherd emerged from behind the oak tree, just as the street lights were beginning to flicker on, moving with a fluid grace that took Emma's breath away. It approached the spot where she'd left that day's offering, a peanut butter sandwich she'd saved from lunch, and delicately picked it up. But instead of disappearing immediately, the dog lifted its head and looked directly at Emma's bedroom window. Even from the second floor, Emma could see those intelligent eyes, searching until they found her small face pressed against the glass. For a moment, that felt like hours, girl and dog regarded each other through the window. Then the German shepherd did something that made Emma's heart soar. It sat down, formally, like the police dogs she'd seen in parades, and gave her what could only be described as a respectful nod before melting back into the shadows. From that night forward, Emma knew with absolute certainty that this wasn't just any lost dog. This was a special dog, a smart dog, a dog that understood somehow that Emma was trying to help. And most importantly, this was a dog that was choosing to stay close to her house, for reasons Emma couldn't understand, but deeply appreciated. She began talking to the dog during her evening vigils, pressing her face to the window and whispering stories about her day, her friends at school. The dog could hear her through the glass, but she liked to think it could. There was something comforting about having a secret friend watching over her house, something that made her feel safer as she fell asleep each night. What Emma couldn't have known was that her mysterious guardian was indeed listening to every word, cataloging every detail of her innocent chatter, and making mental notes about the routines and vulnerabilities of the Martinez household. But unlike the sinister surveillance she might have imagined in her worst nightmares, this watchful presence was motivated entirely by a desire to protect her and her family from dangers they didn't even know existed. As the weeks passed, and Emma's offerings continued to disappear each night, she began to feel a deep connection to her four-legged guardian. She drew pictures of him in the margins of her school notebooks and made up stories about brave police dogs who protected little girls from monsters. She even began including him in her bedtime prayers, asking God to keep her special dog friend safe and warm wherever he lived. Emma had no way of knowing that her innocent friendship and nightly vigils were providing comfort to a highly trained police dog who was struggling with the most difficult assignment of his career, watching over a family he wasn't supposed to care about, in a mission that existed outside official channels and could end his partnership with the only handler he'd ever known. The digital clock on Officer Jake Sullivan's dashboard glowed 11:47 p.m. as he sat in his unmarked patrol car 3 blocks from the Martinez residence. Beside him in the passenger seat, K9 Ranger shifted restlessly, his ears constantly swiveling toward the direction of the judge's house, like furry radar dishes tracking something only he could sense. "Easy, boy," Sullivan murmured, his voice barely above a whisper in the quiet car. "I know you want to get closer, but we can't risk being seen. This whole thing is already way outside protocol." Ranger turned his intelligent brown eyes toward his handler, and Sullivan could swear he saw reproach in that gaze. After 4 years as partners, they could practically read each other's thoughts, and right now, Ranger's thoughts were crystal clear. The little girl who left him food every day was too far away, too exposed, and Sullivan's concerns about protocol were far less important than keeping Emma Martinez safe. Sullivan rubbed his tired eyes and took another sip of his 3rd cup of coffee. He'd been working unofficial surveillance on the Martinez family for 2 weeks now, ever since Captain Morrison had pulled him aside after a shift and explained the situation in hushed, urgent tones. "Jake, we've got credible intelligence that Blake, Richards, and Morrison, the dirty cops we're building the case against, they're planning something against Judge Martinez's family. Nothing concrete enough to get official protection approved, but enough to keep me awake." At night, Captain Morrison had said, his weathered face creased with worry. "I need someone I can trust absolutely. Someone who can keep an eye on the judge's family without making it official. Can you handle that?" Sullivan had agreed immediately, partly out of loyalty to his captain, and partly out of his own sense of justice. But what he hadn't anticipated was how personally invested both he and Ranger would become in the safety of the Martinez family. Particularly 8-year-old Emma, whose nightly vigils at her bedroom window and daily offerings of food had somehow wormed their way into both their hearts. A car's headlights swept around the corner, and Sullivan immediately tensed, his hand moving instinctively to his radio. Ranger's entire body went rigid with alertness, a low growl rumbling deep in his chest. Not loud enough to be heard outside the car, but vibrating through the seat with unmistakable warning. The vehicle moved slowly down the street, far slower than any resident coming home would drive. It was a dark sedan with tinted windows, and even in the dim streetlight, Sullivan could see 2 figures in the front seats. As it passed under a streetlight, he caught a partial glimpse of the license plate and felt his blood run cold. It was Detective Richards' personal vehicle. "Son of a bitch," Sullivan breathed, reaching for his camera and managing to snap several photos as the sedan cruised past the Martinez house. The car slowed even further as it approached the judge's driveway, and Sullivan could see the passenger's window rolling down slightly. Ranger was now vibrating with barely contained energy, every muscle in his body coiled and ready for action. His training told him that this was a threat assessment situation, that suspicious individuals were conducting surveillance on his assigned protection target, and that he should either alert his handler for immediate response, or, if the threat was imminent, take independent protective action. But his handler was making no move to intervene, and Ranger's frustration was palpable. Through the car window, he could see Emma's bedroom window, dark now, indicating she was safely asleep. But these unknown men were studying her house with obvious hostile intent. The sedan completed its slow pass and continued down the street, but not before the passenger side window rolled down completely, and something small was tossed onto the Martinez's front lawn. Sullivan waited until the car had turned the corner and disappeared before starting his engine. "Come on, Ranger. Let's see what our friends left behind." They drove slowly toward the Martinez house, Sullivan's eyes constantly aluminum. A crude drawing of a target symbol followed by the words, "Tick-tock." Sullivan photographed it with his phone before carefully bagging it as evidence, his jaw clenching with anger at the implied threat. Ranger, meanwhile, had begun a systematic sweep of the Martinez property perimeter, his nose working overtime to catalog every scent and identify any signs of intrusion. His patrol brought him to the base of the oak tree where Emma left her daily offerings, and he paused there, looking up toward her bedroom window with what Sullivan could only describe as protective longing. "She's safe, boy," Sullivan whispered, moving to stand beside his partner. "She's inside with her family, and they've got good locks and a security system. We're doing everything we can." But even as he said the words, Sullivan felt the inadequacy of their unofficial protection. They couldn't be here 24 hours a day. They couldn't follow the family everywhere they went. And they couldn't arrest Richards and his accomplices based on circumstantial evidence and vague threats. Ranger seemed to sense his handler's frustration and moved closer, pressing his warm body against Sullivan's leg in a gesture of solidarity. Together, they completed their sweep of the property, finding no evidence of attempted break-ins or additional surveillance devices, but both feeling the weight of an escalating threat. As they walked back toward their car, Sullivan's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Nice dog. Hope nothing happens to it." Sullivan showed the message to Ranger, who sniffed the phone screen and immediately went on high alert, his hackles rising and his lips pulling back in a silent snarl. Somehow, the corrupt officers had not only identified Sullivan and Ranger as the source of surveillance, but were now threatening them directly. "Well, boy, I guess we're officially part of this mess now," Sullivan muttered, forwarding the threatening text to Captain Morrison, along with the photos of Richard's car and the beer can message. "The question is, what are we going to do about it?" Ranger's answer was immediate and unambiguous. He trotted back toward the oak tree, positioned himself with a clear view of both Emma's bedroom window and the street, and settled into alert resting position that clearly indicated he had no intention of leaving his post. Sullivan looked at his partner, this dog who had become his closest friend and most trusted colleague over the past 4 years, and felt a surge of pride mixed with worry. Ranger was making a choice that went far beyond his training, a choice based on instinct, loyalty, and perhaps even love for a little girl who had shown him nothing but kindness. "All right, boy. We'll do this your way, but we're going to be smart about it." Sullivan returned to his car and settled in for what he knew would be a long night of watching, waiting the Martinez family safe until the corruption case could put Richards and his accomplices behind bars where they belonged. As the night deepened and the neighborhood settled into sleep, man and dog maintained their vigilant watch, one official and one completely off the books, both motivated by a sense of justice and protection that went far beyond duty or protocol. Neither of them knew that upstairs in her bedroom, Emma Martinez was having dreams about a brave police dog who watched over good families and kept them safe from the monsters that sometimes wore badges and pretended to be heroes. Dr. Sofia Martinez paused in her morning routine of watering the front garden, her attention caught by something unusual near the oak tree that bordered their property. There, nestled in the grass, was a pristine white food bowl, not the chipped ceramic one Emma had been sneaking outside despite repeated warnings, but a proper stainless steel dog bowl that gleamed in the early morning sunlight. "Emma," she called toward the house, her voice carrying a note of exasperation mixed with curiosity. "Come here, please." Emma appeared in the doorway, still in her pajamas with her hair sticking up at odd angles, looking guilty before she even knew what she was being accused of. "Yes, Mama. Did you put this bowl outside?" Dr. Martinez asked, pointing to the stainless steel dish. Emma's eyes widened with genuine surprise and excitement. "No, Mama, I've never seen that bowl before. Do you think my dog friend brought it? Maybe it's a present." Dr. Martinez knelt down to examine the bowl more closely. It was clearly expensive, with K9 unit engraved in small letters around the rim, definitely not something a lost neighborhood dog would be carrying around. Her medical training kicked in, and she found herself analyzing the situation like a diagnostic puzzle. "Emma, sweetheart, come sit with me for a minute." Dr. Martinez settled onto the front steps and patted the space beside her. "Tell me again about this dog you've been seeing. I want you to describe everything you can remember." For the next 10 minutes, Emma provided a detailed account that was far too specific and consistent to be the product of an 8-year-old's imagination. She described the dog's coloring, Its size, its behavior, even the way it moved with what she called police dog posture. Most telling of all, she mentioned details that she couldn't have made up, like the dog's habit of sitting formally before approaching her offerings, or the way it systematically patrolled the perimeter of their property. "Mama, I know you and Daddy think I'm making it up, but I'm not. He's real, and he's really smart, and I think maybe stress about the corruption case he was presiding over." Roberto had been trying to hide his concerns from the family, but Sofia had noticed the extra phone calls, the increased security measures at the courthouse, and the way he'd started checking and double-checking their home security system every night. "Emma, I want you to promise me something," Dr. Martinez said, pulling her daughter close. "If you see this dog again, don't try to approach it or touch it. Just watch from inside the house and tell me or Daddy immediately. Can you promise me that?" Emma nodded solemnly, sensing the seriousness in her mother's tone, even if she didn't understand the reason for it. "Is something wrong, Mama? Is the dog dangerous?" "No, sweetheart. I don't think the dog is dangerous, but I think there might be complicated reasons why it's here. Reasons that grown-ups need to understand better." Later that morning, after Emma had left for school, Dr. Martinez called her husband at the courthouse. Judge Martinez listened to his wife's account with growing concern, particularly her description of the professional-grade dog bowl and Emma's detailed observations. "Sofia, I need you and Emma to be extra careful for the next few weeks," he said, his voice heavy with implications he couldn't fully explain over the phone. "Don't let Emma play outside alone, and if you see anything unusual, anything at all, call me immediately." "Roberto, what's going on? Does this have something to do with the case you're working on?" Judge Martinez was quiet for a long moment. "I can't discuss details, but yes, there have been some threats. I've been working with courthouse security to assess the situation, but I never imagined it might extend to our home." That afternoon, Dr. Martinez found herself studying every car that drove down their street, every pedestrian who walked past their house. She'd grown up in a rough neighborhood and had developed good instincts for sensing danger, and those instincts were now screaming that her family was being watched. Her suspicions were confirmed when Emma came home from school with news that made Sofia's blood run cold. "Mama, the weirdest thing happened today. Mrs. Patterson from across the street came over to talk to me while I was waiting for the school bus. She said some men in a dark car were asking questions about our family yesterday. What time Daddy leaves for work, what time I get home from school, stuff like that." Dr. Martinez felt her hands begin to shake as she processed this information. What did Mrs. Patterson? She called the school to arrange for Emma to be picked up directly from her classroom rather than waiting at the bus stop. She contacted their neighbor, retired Police Sergeant Bill Henderson, and asked if he could keep an extra eye on their house during the day. And she found herself checking and rechecking the locks on doors and windows with increasing frequency. That evening, as the family sat down for dinner, Judge Martinez's phone rang with an unknown number. He answered with his usual professional greeting, then went silent as he listened to the voice on the other end. "I think you have the wrong number," he said evenly, but Emma could see the tension in her father's jaw and the way his free hand had clenched into a fist. After hanging up, her parents exchanged a look that Emma didn't understand, but that made her stomach feel funny and scared. "What was that, Daddy?" "Just someone with the wrong number, mi niña. Nothing to worry about." But Emma could tell her parents were worried, even if they were trying to hide it from her. The atmosphere in their usually happy home had shifted, becoming charged with an undercurrent of anxiety that made everyone jump at unexpected sounds. Later that night, as Emma lay in bed, she heard her parents talking in hushed, urgent voices in the hallway outside her room. She couldn't make out most of the words, but she caught phrases like police protection, escalating threats, and maybe we should send Emma to stay with your mother. The idea of being sent away from her home and her parents made Emma feel panicky and small. She crept to her bedroom window and peered out into the dark yard, hoping to catch a glimpse of her mysterious guardian dog friend. And there he was, positioned beneath the oak tree in a spot that gave him clear sight lines to both the street and the house. In the moonlight, Emma could see him clearly for the first time, a magnificent German shepherd sitting at perfect attention, ears pricked forward and eyes scanning constantly for any sign of threat. As if sensing her presence at the window, the dog turned his head and looked directly at her. For a moment that felt suspended in time, girl and guardian regarded each other through the glass. Then the dog did something that made Emma's heart swell with gratitude and comfort. He wagged his tail just once, as if to say, "I'm here, you're safe." Emma pressed her small hand against the window glass and whispered, "Thank you for watching over us, beautiful dog. I don't know why you're here, but I'm so glad you are." What Emma couldn't see from her second-floor window was the dark sedan parked 3 blocks away, or the 2 men inside it watching her house through binoculars. She couldn't see Officer Sullivan's unmarked car positioned to intercept any approach to the Martinez property, or the way Ranger's muscles were coiled and ready to spring into protective action at the scary phone calls and her parents' whispered conversations, despite the strange men asking questions and the general feeling that something dangerous was circling her family. She felt safe, knowing that her guardian was out there, standing watch through the long, dark hours of the night. As she finally drifted off to sleep, Emma's last conscious thought was a prayer of gratitude for guardian angels that sometimes came with 4 legs, pointed ears, and the unwavering loyalty of a true protector. The second day of Bring Your Child to Work Day felt nothing like the first. When Emma Martinez took her seat in the courthouse gallery, the air in courtroom 4A was thick and expectant, like the sky before a storm. She'd arrived early with her father and watched the room fill. More prosecutors than yesterday, extra officers posted at key points, and a gallery packed with spectators whose expressions ranged from determined to openly hostile. Some wore uniforms with polished badges. Others, in plain clothes, carried themselves like cops. "Mrs. Chen," Emma whispered as the bailiff adjusted a small recorder on her table, "why do some police officers look mad at other police officers?" "Because when a few do wrong," Mrs. Chen explained gently, "it makes the good ones angry and sad." Emma nodded, opening her sketchpad. She had a habit now, drawing people as the proceedings unfolded, capturing subtle expressions with unthinking accuracy. The prosecution entered first, led by Ms. Rodriguez, moving with the purpose of a teacher about to spring a pop quiz. But when the defendants arrived, Officers Blake, Morrison, and Detective Richards, Emma's crayon froze mid-stroke. Their faces were harder today. Blake's eyes swept the gallery with hostility. Richards glanced at the bench where her father would sit, his smile more like a threat. Even young Morrison carried a swagger that reminded Emma of playground bullies. "All rise," the clerk called. Judge Martinez entered, robes flowing, expression steeled. Ms. Rodriguez began her opening, her voice ringing clear. "You will hear about a conspiracy of corruption that strikes at the heart of what it means to serve and protect. How these defendants betrayed their oaths, intimidated witnesses, and used their badges as weapons." Emma sketched Blake's rigid posture, Richard's clenching fists, Morrison's nervous glances toward the exit. But when the prosecutor spoke of threats against Judge Martinez's family, including his 8-year-old daughter, Emma's crayon rolled from her fingers. She looked to her father. His face was unreadable, but tension. When addressing the alleged threats, his tone turned mocking, dismissing them as expressions of concern about bias. Emma, only 8 but far from naive, caught the warning in his words. "Rule our way, or there will be consequences." Her stomach knotted with fear and anger. She began sketching Webb's face, exaggerating the cruel twist of his mouth and the calculation in his eyes. During lunch, Mrs. Chen glanced at her drawings. "You see people very clearly, Emma. Those men are bad guys," Emma said quietly. "And they did threaten us, didn't they?" Mrs. Chen squeezed her hand. "Your father's one of the bravest, fairest judges I know, and you're safe here." What Emma didn't know was that her innocent sketches would later prove invaluable, revealing key tells about the defendants' personalities and tactics. The afternoon brought witnesses, heroes and villains both. First, Officer Maria Santos, hands trembling as she took the oath, recounted how Richards pressured her to falsify reports and threatened her career if she refused. Emma noticed Blake glaring at Santos, and in her notebook drew protective circles around the stick figure she'd made of the officer. Santos's voice grew stronger as she described going home to her daughter, Emma's age, and realizing she couldn't keep helping criminals. Tears welled in Emma's eyes. Here was a grown-up choosing courage over fear. Other officers followed. Sergeant Robert Kim, who'd worn a wire to gather evidence. Captain Lisa Rodriguez, who'd quietly investigated her own people. The defense cross-examined hard, but Judge Martinez reined them in when questioning crossed the line. As the day wore on, the gallery swelled. Some officers clearly supported the witnesses. Others seemed loyal to the accused. Among the spectators, Emma spotted a woman, likely Blake's wife, shooting venomous glares, and several men whose expressions held barely restrained violence. She overheard chilling whispers. "That Santos bitch better watch her back. The judge's kid is pretty cute. Be a shame if something happened to her." Mrs. Chen's protective hand settled on Emma's shoulder, but Emma refused to leave. "I want to see Daddy win," she said, jaw set. Then came testimony about intercepted communications, plans to neutralize the judge, and make sure his family understands the consequences. Emma's crayon snapped in half. The last witness, retired Detective Frank Morrison, described Richard's descent into believing himself untouchable. "He told me to keep my mouth shut, or else." As the session ended, a clerk brought Judge Martinez a sealed envelope. He read it, his face tightening, and summoned Mrs. Chen. Moments later, Mrs. Chen returned to Emma, her voice low but firm. "Stay close to me. No wandering. If anyone we don't know talks to you, tell me immediately." Emma glanced toward the defense, smiling. A smile that confirmed these weren't men who'd simply made mistakes. They were predators. The drive home was quiet. Judge Martinez's hands gripped the wheel, his eyes flicking to the rear-view mirror. "Daddy, was that letter bad news?" Emma asked. "Just court business," he said. But Emma knew he was hiding something. The note had been short, its threat unmistakable. "Beautiful daughter you have, Judge. It would be terrible if she had an accident on her way home from school." At home, 2 unmarked cars were parked on the street, a man reading a paper from the Hendersons' porch, watching their yard. "Why so many cars?" "Just extra eyes while the trial's going," her father said lightly. Inside, her mother hugged her tighter than usual. "Mama, are we in danger?" "We have good people protecting us," Dr. Martinez assured her. But through the walls, Emma heard her father on the phone, phrases like "increased threat level" and "considering sequestration," chilling her more than she understood. That night her father changed every alarm code, testing the sensors. "Why change them?" she asked. "Just updating our security," he replied. But Emma could feel the truth. The danger was closer than ever. But Emma could tell there was more to it than that. When the phone rang later that evening, both her parents tensed visibly before her father answered with a cautious "hello" rather than his usual warm greeting. The call turned out to be from her grandmother, but Emma noticed how long it took her parents to relax, even after they confirmed it was a family member. At bedtime, Emma's usual routine was disrupted by additional security measures she didn't fully understand. Her father checked her bedroom windows twice, adjusting the locks and testing the security sensors. Her mother spent extra time tucking her in, sitting beside her bed longer than usual and humming the lullabies she used to sing when Emma was much younger. "Mama, will you and Daddy be okay?" Emma asked, her voice small in the darkened room. "We're all going to be fine, mi amor. Your father is very brave and very good at his job, and he has lots of people helping him make sure justice is served." After her parents kissed her goodnight and closed her door, Emma lay in bed, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of their house under surveillance. She could hear the quiet conversations of the security officers outside, the occasional crackle of radio communications, and the sound of cars driving slowly past their house at regular intervals. Unable to sleep, Emma crept to her bedroom window and peered out into the dark yard. And there, in his familiar position beneath the oak tree, was her mysterious guardian dog. Tonight he seemed more alert than usual, his ears constantly moving as he tracked sounds Emma couldn't hear, his body coiled with tension that matched her parents' obvious stress. Looked up at her and gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. Emma pressed her hand against the glass and whispered, "I'm scared, beautiful dog. Are you scared too?" The dog's response was to shift positions slightly so that he had an even better view of both her bedroom window and the street approaches to their house. Emma took comfort in knowing that even if she didn't understand everything that was happening, her four-legged guardian was taking the threats as seriously as everyone else. From downstairs, Emma could hear her parents talking in voices they thought were too quiet for her to hear. But their daughter had excellent hearing, and the words that drifted up to her room filled her with a mixture of fear and determination. "Roberto, maybe we should send Emma to stay with my mother until this trial is over," Dr. Martinez was saying. "I've considered it, but moving her could actually make her more vulnerable. At least here we have controlled security and can monitor the situation. But that note today, they're specifically threatening our daughter, which is exactly why I'm going to make sure these criminals, get the maximum sentence allowed by law. They want to intimidate me through Emma, but all they've done is guarantee that I'll do everything in my power to see justice served." Emma felt a surge of pride at her father's words, even as she realized the full extent of the danger her family was facing. These weren't just bad guys who had stolen money or told lies. These were evil people who would hurt an innocent child to avoid punishment for their crimes. Rolling onto her back and staring up at the ceiling, Emma began her bedtime prayers with more earnestness than she'd ever brought to the nightly ritual. But tonight, Alongside her usual requests for blessings on her family and friends, she added new petitions that reflected her growing understanding of the world's complexities. Dear God, please keep Mama and Daddy safe and help Daddy make the right decisions in his courthouse. Please protect all the good police officers who are trying to catch the bad police officers. And please keep my guardian dog safe too. I don't know why he's watching over us, but I think he's one of the good guys, and I think he might be in danger because he's protecting us. She paused, thinking about Officer Santos and the other brave witnesses who had risked their safety to tell the truth. And please give courage to all the people who are trying to do the right thing, even when it's scary. Help them know that being scared is okay as long as you keep trying to help other people. Emma's final prayer was whispered so quietly that only God and perhaps her guardian angel could hear it. And please don't let the bad guys win. I know Daddy always says everyone deserves a fair trial, but these men are really, really bad, and they want to hurt children. Please don't let them hurt anyone else. Outside her window, Ranger maintained his silent vigil, his keen senses tracking every movement in the shadows around the Martinez home. He couldn't understand the little girl's whispered prayers, but he sensed her fear and determination through some mysterious connection that transcended the barriers between human and animal, child and protector. As Emma finally drifted off to sleep, her last conscious thought was a promise to herself. Tomorrow, she would pay even closer attention to everything happening in her father's courtroom. If these bad guys thought they could scare her family into giving up, they were about to learn that the Martinez family, all three of them, plus one very special guardian dog, were stronger and braver than anyone had imagined. The battle between good and evil was intensifying, but Emma was no longer just an innocent bystander. She was becoming a participant in the fight for justice, even if she didn't yet understand just how crucial her role would become in the dramatic events that lay ahead. The third day of the corruption trial dawned gray and wet, storm clouds muscling low over the courthouse as if the sky understood what courtroom 4A was about to carry. The gallery buzzed in low, nervous threads. Emma Martinez sat where she always did, her crayons lined like tiny soldiers beside her sketchpad, but her attention never left the uneasy drift of whispers and glances moving through the room. Everything felt sharper, more electric, more dangerous. Mrs. Chen hovered closer than she had on the previous 2 days, a hand resting on the back of Emma's chair, her eyes combing the gallery like someone expecting the hush before a break. Security had thickened at every doorway. 2 court officers stood by the jury box. Several men in discreet suits slid into seats along the back. Federal, Emma had learned to recognize by the unshowy way they watched everything. Mrs. Chen, Emma murmured, sorting her crayons into a rainbow. Why is everyone so nervous today? Because the prosecution is bringing something important, Mrs. Chen answered softly. When evidence is strong, guilty people get desperate. At 9:30 sharp, the doors opened and the room's hum rose half a note. A tall officer in a crisp uniform came down the center aisle, and beside him, Emma's hand froze midline, her breath jumped. The German shepherd moved with the silent authority of a veteran, thick coat, alert eyes, presence that made backs straighten 2 rows away. But what turned the air bright in Emma's chest were the particulars, the white patch on his chest she had drawn from her bedroom window, the tiny notch at the tip of his left ear, the way his tail curved when he sat just so. It wasn't just any canine. It was her guardian dog, the one who'd watched from under the oak. Emma whispered, hands gripping the table. That's my dog friend, the one who's been visiting our house. Emma, are you sure? Police dogs can look. No, look at the white patch on his ear and how he sits. She was too excited to keep her voice down. Heads turned. The shepherd's ears twitched in their direction. He did not break posture, but Emma felt his attention find her like a quiet line between them. His handler stood easy and sure, a man in his early 30s with kind eyes, a posture that said he was exactly where he was meant to be, and a quiet way of placing himself beside the dog that told Emma what mattered. This was a partnership. "Ladies and gentlemen," Prosecutor Rodriguez told the jury, "this is Officer Jake Sullivan and his canine partner Ranger from the Metropolitan Police Department's Narcotics Division." Ranger, Emma repeated in her mind. It fit, a good, strong name for a dog who guarded. Ms. Rodriguez explained, not selling but measuring out facts with care. Canine units, detection procedures, why a demonstration mattered. Officer Sullivan and Ranger have worked together for years. Ranger has located narcotics in over 200 cases with a 98% accuracy rate, as confirmed by lab testing. Pride rose up in Emma like a warm tide. Her guardian dog wasn't just gentle beneath the oak. He was a professional, a hero doing real work in a harsh world. Across the defense table, reactions tightened like springs. Officer Blake went pale. Detective Richards kept clenching and unclenching his hands as if the air had become too tight around his bones. Even Officer Morrison, youngest of the three, stared at Ranger with plain fear. The more Ms. Rodriguez laid out what the jury would see, the more the defendants seemed to shrink inside their suits. "Your Honor," Ms. Rodriguez said to Judge Martinez, "the prosecution requests a demonstration of Ranger's drug detection capabilities, using evidence seized from the defendant's personal lockers." "Granted," the judge said, voice level. "No waste in it. Proceed." Officer Sullivan worked with professional economy. Evidence bags laid in a line with control samples, sandwiches, books, laundry, coffee, mixed between them. He didn't posture for the jury, he didn't need to. He moved with a rhythm that said doing the job well was argument enough. When he stood up and gave a small nod, Ranger's eyes brushed the gallery, just a flicker, and for a beat Emma saw it. Relief. The gentle loosening of a held breath, as if he had hoped she would be here, and seeing her safe eased something in him. She bit her lip to keep from waving. "Ranger, search," Sullivan said. The room went very still. Ranger slid into motion, nose low, tail an instrument, ears working like separate instruments, weaver, pulling one bright thread from a knot of others without tangling the loom. He reached the first target, cocaine from Officer Blake's locker, and sat, straight-backed and formal, gaze pinned to the bag. "Passive alert," Sullivan explained. Reward followed. A tennis ball, appearing like a blessing, a fast wag, a breath of play. Then business again. The simple mercy of routine. Sweat shined at Blake's hairline. He leaned in to hiss something at his attorney. The attorney's pen skated hard across his legal pad. Second hit. Heroin allegedly tied to Richards. Same crisp sit. Same focused stillness. The tick at Richards' eye jumped to life. He tried to still it with a hard blink. It came back twice as sharp. The third stop made Emma's chest bloom with fierce pride. Methamphetamine. Notoriously challenging to detect, Sullivan told the jurors, not boastful, but reverent about his partner's work. "A dog's nose can be 40 times more sensitive than ours. Ranger can locate substances at concentrations down to parts per billion, and he's trained to distinguish dozens of odors, even in masking agents." Ranger did not care about the speech. He simply worked, and when he found the needle in the haystack, he sat again, ready for his ball, for that small joy that said, "Yes, you did it. Yes, the work matters." "Objection!" Attorney Webb shot up. "This is theater. We stipulate the substances are narcotics. This prejudices the jury." "Overruled," Judge Martinez said evenly. "The demonstration addresses reliability." The defense sat. The jury watched. Ranger kept moving, ignoring the controls: coffee, bleach, spice, never false alerting. That, Sullivan said, was as important as anything. Knowing when not to call danger, danger. And yet, through it all, Ranger's awareness of Emma never faded. A glance threaded through the work, a flick of the ear at a soft sound she made, without meaning to. He kept her in the edge of his perception, like a lighthouse on a foggy coast. By the end, Officer Morrison was sweating through his collar. His notes devolved to scribbles. Richards pressed his fingertips hard into the table, as if the wood might steady him. Blake had moved from bloodless to blotched, rage painting heat into his face. He stared at Ranger with a hatred so plain Emma had to look away. It terrified her, that someone could hate the truth-teller more than the truth. Started toward the doors. And something in Emma broke loose. She had tried to be good. She had tried to be quiet. But watching Ranger's back move away, calm and correct, felt like watching a door swing shut. "Ranger!" Her voice rang like a bell in cold air. "Ranger, it's me! It's Emma!" Everything in the room snapped toward her. Eyes, breaths, attention. Mrs. Chen's hand reached for Emma's sleeve, but Emma was already standing on her chair, both hands lifted like a little flag in a storm. "I know you!" she cried, pure joy in her voice. "You're my guardian dog. You've been protecting our house and eating my sandwiches and watching me from under the oak tree." Chaos broke. Lawyers hissed, the gallery erupted, the court officers shifted forward, the hum became a jagged line. Ranger stopped in his tracks, turned fully, and for the first time all morning, his tail wagged. He took several steps toward her, ears forward, eyes alight with the kind of recognition you cannot stage. "Order!" The gavel cracked down sharp as lightning. Judge Martinez's voice cut through the noise. "Order in the court!" He looked from the dog to his daughter, shock swiftly banked beneath a judge's controlled expression. "Emma," he said, even and careful, "please sit. Tell me what you mean." She dropped into her chair, breathless. "Daddy, this is the dog I told you about. He's been coming every night. I left food. He stayed and watched the house. I knew he was special," she said, beaming through the tears that had sprung up without warning. "But I didn't know he was a police dog." The revelation moved through the room in widening circles. Ms. Rodriguez wrote fast, thoughts clicking into a pattern only she could see. The defense bent toward each other in a knot of urgent whispers. A shock of calculation ran across Webb's face and was hastily smoothed flat. The federal agents in the back did not move, but Emma felt their attention harden. At the defense table, the three officers unraveled in three different ways. Blake looked like he'd swallowed ice water. Richard's jaw worked. Morrison went gray-green at the edges. The only thing they agreed on was their stare, three glances that fell on Ranger like, "Wish you weren't." Sullivan's expression was the strangest, a mix of alarm, realization, and something like pride. Puzzle pieces clicked hard in his eyes. Their unofficial surveillance detail, Ranger's insistence on looping past the Martinez place even when routes were changed, the disappeared food, the dog who broke a little rule in service of a greater one. "Your Honor," he said, respectful but urgent, "I request an immediate sidebar. There are complications that need to be discussed privately. 15-minute recess, Judge Martinez said. Bailiff, hold all parties available. Noise rose in the room like water in a culvert. The judge stepped down. The prosecutor and federal agents converged. Sullivan found himself in the center of a tight conversation. He kept glancing toward Emma, and when their eyes met, something steady passed between them. "We'll be careful," his look seemed to say. "We'll do this right." Ranger resisted being led away. He looked over his shoulder until the last possible moment, the yearning in his eyes almost human. Mrs. Chen knelt by Emma's chair. "Sweetheart," she said, gentle but focused, "what you said could be very important. I have to ask, are you absolutely sure it's the same dog?" Emma nodded hard, willing her certainty into the world. "The white patch on his chest, the notch in his ear, how he sits with his tail curled around his paws. I've watched him for months. I know his face." Across the well, the judge conferred with staff, then with Miss Rodriguez, then with the suits in back. The defense gathered like men clinging to a raft. Webb's mouth was a tight line. His pen had stopped. Richards rubbed his temple hard, as if he could press out a headache and the future at once. Blake stared at the floor, chin tucked, hands folded so tightly the knuckles had gone bone-white. Emma watched all of it, and for the first time that morning, felt not just pride, but weight. She had told the truth the way children do, straight ahead, without angling it to make it easier on anyone. And in telling it, she had shifted the room. She could feel that even if she didn't fully understand the mechanisms, her words had pulled a thread that ran from a backyard oak to a courtroom table to a web of men who preferred shadows. Ranger's eyes found her again across the distance. Gratitude lived there, and relief, and something fierce that made her think of how he watched the house after the porch light went out. The disguise had fallen away just a little, and for once he didn't hide the affection he'd kept tucked behind duty. The 15 minutes stretched, as court minutes do. The prosecutor returned to counsel table with new papers in hand. The agents remained standing. The judge mounted the bench again with a face that belonged to the gavel and the law. But before court was called back to order, Sullivan angled over, Ranger sitting at heel, posture correct, but eyes still drifting toward the gallery. "Miss Chen," he said quietly. "Judge Martinez?" He waited until he had both their attentions. "With the court's permission, I believe there's context I can provide that relates to public safety concerns and the integrity of an ongoing investigation." Emma sat very still. She didn't know what context and integrity would amount to, but she knew the important part already. The world had seen what she had always known. Ranger wasn't just a shadow under an oak. He was a good guy in a dark world. Rearranged. The jurors filed in with the kind of careful attention people bring to places where something real has happened. The gallery quieted as if it had learned to listen. Ms. Rodriguez stood. "Your Honor," she said, "based on information developed during the recess, the state intends to move to admit new evidence supporting ongoing intimidation concerns and a pattern of surveillance on the Martinez residence. We request a sealed sidebar to protect sensitive details and the safety of a minor." Webb rose, already objecting, but the judge lifted a hand. "Sidebar granted. Counsel only." Emma watched adults gather in the hush of law. She couldn't hear their words, but she didn't need to. She saw the shape of them in the way people held their shoulders, in the small muscle at Webb's jaw, in the stillness in her father's eyes. She felt Ranger's attention on her like a steadying hand. Whatever came next would come fast. It would be complicated and legal and full of terms she didn't yet know. But one thing had been laid down clean. The truth had a shape you could feel, even when you couldn't name all its parts. She had given it voice when it mattered, the way 8-year-olds sometimes do, not clever, just honest. When the lawyers returned to their tables, the judge spoke in measured tones. "We will proceed carefully. The safety of witnesses, including minors, is paramount." Emma's breath eased. She glanced at Ranger. He sat tall and calm, ready for whatever work the next hour demanded. She pressed her palms together as if in prayer, and sent all her thanks across the open floor, for nights under the oak and sandwiches eaten with careful politeness, and the way the world finally saw him. In the days to come, people would call Ranger a key witness. They would talk about reliability and chain of custody and training logs and parts per billion. They would say his alerts mapped like coordinates onto a pattern of corruption that could no longer be explained away. They would say a minor's statement led to corroboration that closed a circle. Emma would remember something simpler, a gray morning, a room humming with worry, the way a dog's head turned at the sound of his name, and how joy knocked formality aside for 2 heartbeats. Under it all ran the same quiet truth she had carried for months. The guardian who waited by her fence in the dark was, after all, exactly who she thought he was. A good guy in a world that needed him. And now everyone could see it. Judge Martinez's chambers had never felt smaller. What felt like half the courthouse had squeezed into the wood-paneled room behind courtroom 4A. Prosecutors, federal agents, court security, and Officer Sullivan with Ranger at his side, all waiting for an 8-year-old to explain how she knew a police dog who on paper was a stranger. Emma sat in her father's leather chair, legs dangling, hands folded, feeling both important and exposed. Her father had slipped off his robe, but the judge in him was still there in the set of his jaw as he crouched beside her. Concern, confusion, and something like alarm flickered behind his steady voice. "Emma, mi niña, I need you to tell me everything about this dog. When did you first see him? How often was he at our house? And why didn't you tell Mama and me he was really there?" Her lip trembled. "Am I in trouble? I didn't mean to mess up your court. I just got excited when I saw my friend." "You're not in trouble," he said, tension threading the assurance. "But this is very important. Try to remember everything." She did. The story she'd told her parents for months, the one they'd filed under imagination, spilled out, and in the presence of Ranger's quiet recognition, it sounded suddenly undeniable. "It started 3 months ago. I was coming home from school and saw a beautiful dog by our oak tree. He looked smart and kind. He wanted to be friends, but he stayed back." She told them about the food she left, the waiting at her window, how Ranger slowly allowed her presence but never closed a last inch. He was polite. He always sat before taking the food. He'd look up at my window like he was saying thank you. And when strange cars went by, he'd get alert and move closer to the house, like he was protecting us. Officer Sullivan leaned forward, both impressed and uneasy. "Did you see him during the day, Emma, or mostly evenings?" "Mostly at night," she said. "Sometimes early morning before school, when it was still dark. He was always there before bedtime. Always." Around the room, adults traded looks. Ms. Rodriguez scribbled notes. Federal agents shifted from curiosity to calculation. The judge's gaze went to Sullivan. Parent and jurist collided in his tone. "Officer Sullivan, explain why my daughter has been under surveillance by your police dog without my consent." Color rose up Sullivan's neck. "Your Honor, this is complicated. I want to be honest. My actions weren't officially sanctioned." "Your actions?" The edge in Martinez's voice tightened the room. Are you telling me you conducted unauthorized surveillance on my family? Emma's sense of fairness sparked. He's a good guy, Daddy. Ranger wouldn't work with a bad officer. Police dogs only work with good ones. Right? The simple logic slowed the fuse. The judge glanced from his daughter to the handler to the dog, whose eyes followed every speaker. He exhaled. Officer Sullivan, you'll give the complete truth. Why you watched my family? Who authorized it? Resources. As Sullivan outlined threatening calls, suspicious vehicles, and the pattern of intimidation aimed at the Martinez home, Emma's stomach dropped. If bad officers wanted to hurt us, she asked softly, why didn't you tell me and Mama? Why pretend everything was normal? Her father's face softened with regret. To protect you from fear. I thought better locks, careful routines, and vigilance would be enough without burdening your childhood. So Ranger was protecting us because the bad men wanted to hurt us, and Officer Sullivan helped? That's right, Sullivan said. Ranger and I watched your home every night. Emma looked at Ranger with a dawning, grateful awe. Her stray hadn't been hungry so much as on duty, quiet, relentless, and brave. Thank you, Ranger, she whispered. The German shepherd's tail gave a single, dignified wag. The room's mood shifted from confusion to purpose. Sullivan continued, voice steadying as confession turned to report. 2 months ago, threats escalated. We intercepted communications referencing family pressure points to influence your rulings. The judge's hands clenched. Specifics about my wife and daughter? Sullivan hesitated, glancing at Emma. She straightened, surprising them all with her resolve. I want to know too. I'm not a baby. Detective Richards referenced your daughter's school schedule, Sullivan said carefully. Walking times, route, when she was alone. He said, accidents happen to little girls without proper supervision. Officer Blake suggested judges might need a more personal lesson. A chill traced Emma's spine. The dark blue sedan her mother noticed. The men lost on their street. The calls that made her parents' voices go hush. None of it had been random. That's why Ranger was always there, after school, she said, fitting pieces together. And alert when cars slowed. He was watching for the bad guys. Ranger's instincts are exceptional, Sullivan said. He prioritized your safety instinctively. Ms. Rodriguez tapped her pen. Was Ranger trained for protective detail? No, Sullivan said, pride threading his voice. He went beyond training, running patrol patterns, anchoring where he could see Emma's window, reacting to anomalies. He self-assigned the protection. Emma's worry broke through. Wasn't that dangerous? What if the bad guys tried to hurt him? Sullivan's expression darkened. They threatened K9 units. We intercepted chatter. Richards joked, heroic dogs have tragic accidents, and I might end up partnerless if I didn't back off. Emma's hand flew to her mouth. Fury, new and hot, tightened her small voice. Those are really bad men. The federal agents nodded grimly. Intimidation of a judge, threats to a child, targeting a police dog, obstruction stacked on corruption. Patrols, close calls. The communication system Emma created with food on the porch and a light in her window. He didn't settle until her bedroom light went out, he said. On 3 occasions, suspicious individuals approached. Ranger deterred them. Agent Sarah Collins, the federal lead, spread files on the judge's desk. Her partner, Agent Mark Rivera, fired up a laptop to cross-reference. The room buzzed as Emma's friendship with a dog crystallized into evidence. Emma, Collins said, kneeling to meet her eyes, may we record your observations? They could help protect other families. Her father hesitated. You don't have to. I want to help, Emma said, looking to Ranger. He protected me. Now I want to help protect other kids. The recorder clicked. For 30 remarkable minutes, Emma delivered the details adults miss. Cars that circled at specific times, license plates she memorized because they looked interesting, faces she had noticed, the rhythm of phone calls and parental whispers. One car, dark blue, dent on the front bumper, like a frowny face, came Tuesdays and Thursdays, she said, brow furrowed. Ranger got tense whenever he heard it. Rivera looked up sharply. That matches Detective Richard's personal vehicle. We had him under surveillance, but we didn't realize he was conducting regular drive-bys of your house. Emma described nights when Ranger paced more because her father worked late, how he ranged wider on the property, how calls always seemed to come just after she got home from school. Collins glanced at Rivera. They timed intimidation for maximum impact. Family together, fear amplified. The judge listened, pride and dread warring across his features. His daughter's observations were precise, her courage unshakable, and the danger had been real. "Emma, I'm proud of how smart and brave you've been," he said, voice roughened. "You noticed things that will help us stop them." She nodded, then worried aloud about the only hero she could pet. Is Ranger going to get in trouble for protecting us? Because he did the right thing. It wouldn't be fair if good dogs get punished for being heroes. Sullivan cleared his throat. Technically, we broke protocol by acting without authorization. But nothing, Judge Martinez said, the full weight of his office in his voice. You and Ranger showed extraordinary courage, protecting my family from a credible threat. As far as this court is concerned, your actions reflect the best of law enforcement. Collins added, we'll be recommending commendations. You prevented a tragedy and advanced a federal investigation. Relief and pride swelled in Emma. So, Ranger really is like a superhero, she whispered. No, he accepted the scratches behind his ears she'd been saving for him for months. I love you, Ranger, she murmured. The room breathed with it, the quiet, undeniable bond between a small girl and the dog who had watched over her in the dark. Around them, plans accelerated. Agents mapped timelines using Emma's notes, Ranger's patterns, and intercepted communications. Miss Rodriguez adjusted charging strategies. Witness tampering, intimidation of a judicial officer, conspiracy, threats against a law enforcement animal. Rivera queued warrants with dates and times cross-checked against Emma's frowny dent car. Tuesdays and Thursdays circled in red. Sullivan added the field notes he'd kept to avoid risking digital trails. License plates jotted on napkins, partial transcripts of overheard jokes, his logs of Ranger's alerts. He outlined the 3 close calls, a slow-rolling sedan that accelerated when Ranger stepped into the headlights, a man on foot who changed direction when Ranger appeared between the porch and the yard, a motorcycle idling 2 blocks down on a night the judge was working late. Engine killed the second Ranger moved off the lawn and vanished down the side street. Emma listened, absorbing the adult world's machinery spinning toward justice. Surveillance footage to be pulled, phone records to be seized, sworn statements to be taken. She didn't know how to do any of that, but she could tell them the way Ranger's ears tipped when the blue car approached, how his body got taller somehow when he sensed danger, how he wouldn't eat until he'd seen her bedroom light flick off. Your instincts were right, Collins told her, and you were brave enough to trust them. Sullivan looked at the judge. For what it's worth, Your Honor, Ranger chose Emma. He wasn't ordered to fixate on your house. He did it because he understood where the vulnerability was. The judge's answer was quiet. Then I owe him more than thanks. Ranger's tail thumped once against the chair. By the time the clock ticked past the half hour, the shape of the expanded case was clear. The bad guys weren't just dirty cops cutting corners. They were men willing to menace a judge's family, terrify a child, and threaten a service dog to keep power and avoid prison. Their mistake had been assuming fear would silence the small and the loyal, that a little girl would keep quiet, that a dog's devotion could be broken. Emma shifted her fingers beneath Ranger's chin and looked around at the grown-ups, building something strong with her fragments of memory. She had been the unknowing center of a quiet war between good and evil for months. Somehow, through a paper plate of food, a light in a window, and a dog who refused to stand down, the good had held its ground. "Agent Collins?" Emma asked. "When this is over," nodded, satisfied in the simple way children are when the truth lands. Good work matters, and love is stronger than fear. She pressed her cheek to Ranger's head, and he closed his eyes, duty easing for the first time in a long while. Outside, courtroom 4A waited. Warrants would be signed, arrests made, careers ended, and a city's faith tested. Inside the chambers, a judge rested a hand on his daughter's shoulder. An officer scratched his partner's ear, and a federal team turned a child's observations into the spine of a case. The bad men had underestimated a quiet house with a lighted window and a dog who refused to quit. They had not accounted for the power of a little girl who saw clearly, a father who chose integrity, and a shepherd who stood his post until the danger passed. Love, loyalty, and a watchful guardian had kept a family safe. Now, with the room humming toward retribution, they would help keep a community safe too. The courthouse's victim services office had been remade into a child's island of calm. Soft lamps, cushioned chairs in a circle, a low table with books and a tray of colored pencils. Dr. Patricia Hernandez, a veteran child psychologist for the federal courts, had prepared dozens of young witnesses for terrifying rooms and harder questions. She had never met one quite like 8-year-old Emma Martinez. Emma sat cross-legged in a deep chair, Mr. Buttons tucked under one arm, sketchpad open on her lap. At her feet, Ranger held a perfect downstay, approved by the court as an emotional support accommodation. Dr. Hernandez spoke softly, explaining the mechanics of the day, the oath, questions, pauses, who would sit where, like stepping stones across a stream. "It's important," she told Emma, "and it's normal to feel nervous. Even adults get butterflies." Emma's fingers combed absent-mindedly through Ranger's fur. "What if I forget something important? What if I say the wrong thing and help the bad guys?" "Your only job is to tell the truth about what you saw and heard," Dr. Hernandez said. "You don't have to help anyone. Just answer honestly. If you don't know, say you don't know. If you don't remember, say you don't remember. That's what truth looks like." For the last hour, Dr. Hernandez had watched Emma separate fact from feeling with unusual clarity for a child. She understood the difference between what she had seen and what she'd guessed. That ability, rare at any age, would carry her through. "Let's practice once more," Dr. Hernandez said. A gentle rehearsal followed. The first time Emma saw the dog under the oak tree, the nightly ritual of food on the step, the wary courtship of a careful animal and a careful child, the moments when Ranger's posture changed because something outside changed. It's their job to test the evidence. It doesn't mean they're bad people. It means the system is making sure the truth is strong enough to stand. Emma's brow knit. "Will they try to say Ranger wasn't protecting us? Because I know he was." "They might suggest different explanations," Dr. Hernandez said. "But you're telling the truth. That usually shines through." A knock sounded. Judge Martinez stepped in wearing a dark suit instead of robes. Emma lit up, and he kept a careful distance between father and judge. "How is our star witness?" he asked, taking a chair, but not her hand. "I'm nervous," she said, "but Ranger makes me braver." The judge considered the dog, still as stone, eyes bright and tracking, as if he knew the weight of the morning. "I'm proud of you," he said. "It isn't easy for anyone to do what you're doing." "Daddy," Emma whispered, "will I be able to see you? When I'm scared, I like to look at you." His heart tightened. "I'll be in my chair, Menina, but I have to be the judge in there, not Daddy. I can't nod or smile. I have to be fair to everyone." "I know," she said, older than her years. "Will Mrs. Chen be with me? And can Ranger stay?" "They'll both be right there," Dr. Hernandez said. "Everyone in that room, jury, lawyers, even the judge, wants you to do well. They want to hear your truth." Emma spent a quiet minute with Ranger, face buried in his coat. "I'm going to tell them how brave you are," she whispered. "I'm going to tell them you're a hero." Ranger's tail gave a muted thump. He pressed closer. From across the room, Officer Sullivan watched and swallowed. He came over, emotion roughening his voice. "Emma, in all my years, I've never seen a partnership like yours and Ranger's. He chose to protect you. Now you're choosing to protect others by telling your story. That's hero work." "Really?" she asked, eyes shining. "I'm a hero like Ranger?" "Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is tell the truth when it's scary," he said. "That's what you're about to do." Dr. Hernandez gathered her notes. "Ready?" Emma smoothed her navy dress with white flowers, the one she wore on her first day at the courthouse, took a breath, and nodded. "Ranger and I are going to help make sure the bad guys can't hurt families anymore." They stepped into the corridor, and then into the solemn hush of courtroom 4A. Emma wore her shiniest black shoes and a blue ribbon braided into her hair, courage from her mother's hands. She carried Mr. Buttons and a drawing she had made the night before. The defense table, Officers Blake and Morrison, and Detective Richards, sat with their attorneys. Hostility, worry, and something like fear passed across their faces. Blake's fists whitened. Richards stared at Emma with cold calculation that drew a ripple of discomfort through the jury row. "The United States calls Emma Martinez," Ms. Rodriguez announced, her voice both formal and tender. Emma walked the long aisle with Mrs. Chen's hand in hers, Ranger matching her at a perfect heel. The witness stand had been adapted, a booster seat, so the jury could see her face. A small table for Mr. Buttons and the drawing, and a carpeted space by the chair where Ranger could lie in view. An accommodation approved unanimously by a judicial panel. "Raise your right hand," the clerk said, offering a children's Bible. "Do you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" "I promise," Emma said, clear and steady. She'd practiced, she meant it. She settled in, arranged Mr. Buttons, took a breath, and let her fingertips graze Ranger's head. "Emma," Ms. Rodriguez began, warmth in her tone, "tell the jury about the first time you saw Ranger." For 20 minutes, Emma held the room. She told the story plainly. The dog by the oak tree, the cautious dance, food offerings, set out and quietly accepted. The way he sat, like a polite visitor. How he watched the house at night from the same spot, as if posting himself there. She described with child's honesty and precision the nights his body changed, tall and tense, and the slow car that circled and circled, until the dog would not leave the stoop. Ms. Rodriguez placed photos of vehicles under surveillance on the witness table. Emma studied them and pointed. "That one," she said, tapping a dark blue car with a dent on the front bumper. "It looks like a frowny face. It came by a lot. Several jurors glanced at Richards, whose face had drained of color. Then Emma spoke of love in the simplest terms. "I loved him before I knew his name," she said. "When I had bad dreams or thunder scared me, I looked out and saw him, and I felt safe." The courtroom went so quiet the court reporters' styluses sounded like rain. Cross-examination fell to attorney Marcus Webb, a careful man who knew the risks of questioning a child. He smiled a grandfatherly smile, kept his voice mild. "Good morning, Emma. I'm Mr. Webb. I just have a few questions. All right?" Emma nodded. Her hand found Ranger's head. "You mostly saw the dog after dark, from your bedroom window on the second floor. Is that right?" "Yes, sir, but there's a street light by our tree. I could see him. German shepherds look a lot alike. How can you be certain the dog you saw is this dog?" "I watched around his paws, how he tilts his head when he's listening hard, and how his ears move when he hears something." Right on cue, Ranger's ears rotated toward a small sound in the gallery. A few jurors smiled. "You have a good imagination," Webb said. "You like pretend play?" "I do," Emma said, "but I know pretend from real." Ranger was real. The food was gone in the morning. Sometimes I saw him eat it. "Couldn't a raccoon or a stray car have eaten it?" "Raccoons make a mess," Emma said patiently. Ranger ate neat. The empty bowl stayed in the same place. "When you saw men in cars, isn't it possible they were lost or visiting neighbors?" "Lost people don't drive past the same house over and over," Emma said. "They look at house numbers. These men were looking at our house and writing things down." At the defense table, Richard's pen stuttered on his pad. Webb changed angles, voice tightening despite himself. "Isn't it possible other adults told you what to think? That you're confused about some details?" Ranger rose from his downstay to a seated alert, eyes fixed, posture protective. No sound, no snarl, just a clear line drawn. He was paying attention. Emma sat a little taller. "No, sir, no one told me what to say. I remember because it mattered. Ranger was my friend, and I paid attention." "Mr. Webb," the judge said from the bench, neutral but edged. "The witness has answered. Move on." Webb tried a few more paths. Timeline, lighting, adult conversations bleeding into memory, and found each blocked by the same quiet solidity. Emma's answers stayed consistent, specific when she knew, honest when she didn't. The jury's faces softened from protectiveness to something sturdier, belief. His last attempt was the worst choice he could have made. "You talk like this dog is a pet. He's a working police dog. Isn't it more likely he was just doing his job, and you misunderstood?" Emma looked at him with a calm that made the room still. "Ranger is a working police dog. He's very good at his job. He can also care about people and choose to protect them, even when no one tells him to. That's what makes him special. He doesn't just follow orders. He follows his heart. His heart told him to protect my family because we needed protection from bad people who wanted to hurt us." She glanced at the jury, voice steady. "The most important thing about police officers, two-legged or four-legged, is that they care about protecting innocent people. Good officers like Ranger and Officer Sullivan risk themselves to keep families safe. Bad officers," her eyes flicked to the table where Judge Martinez said, formal, level, and something proud and paternal flickered in his eyes despite the robe. Emma gathered Mr. Buttons and her drawing. She knelt, hugged Ranger's neck. "Thank you for protecting me up here too," she whispered. She stepped down with Mrs. Chen. The first claps were tentative, improper for a federal courtroom. Then the room rose in a soft wave. Officers, agents, clerks, even a few who would be reprimanded later, applauding a child who had told the truth without embroidery and a dog who had guarded that truth in darkness. They hadn't just survived a morning. They had shifted a case. Emma put a human face on family pressure points, turned months of surveillance and transcripts into a story 12 strangers could feel in their own bones. Ranger remained a quiet presence at her heel, the same steady shadow who had sat beneath an oak tree night after night, refusing to stand down. In the days to come, warrants would be signed and arrests made, but everyone in courtroom 4A knew they had just seen the moment the center of gravity moved, when corruption, intimidation, and fear were forced to make room for something stronger, a child's honest voice and a shepherd who would not quit. Emma's testimony landed like a stone in still water, ripples radiating through the courthouse, pulling in fresh evidence, new witnesses, and proof of a conspiracy that reached far beyond the original 3 defendants. The shift began almost immediately. In the corridor during recess, Officer Maria Santos, who had already testified about Detective Richards' pressure tactics, pulled Ms. Rodriguez aside. "After hearing that little girl today," she said, voice trembling, "I can't keep this to myself. Richards didn't just threaten uncooperative officers. He mentioned Judge Martinez's daughter. Said judges who don't understand family values might need a lesson about unprotected children." Within hours, prosecutors had emergency warrants for phone records, GPS logs, and business surveillance near the Martinez home. The data matched Emma's account exactly. Richards's personal car, dark blue, dented bumper, appeared repeatedly at school bus times. His phone pinged towers near the house 17 times during months. Emma saw suspicious cars. Burner phone calls lined up with the very dates she remembered. Even Emma's courtroom sketches became evidence. Analysts noticed her drawings, captured details missed by cameras. Officer Blake passing Richards a note mid-testimony. Investigators recovered the note from the trash. Coded talk about eliminating the witness problem and permanent solutions for loose ends in Blake's handwriting and Richards' shorthand. More officers came forward. Sergeant Janet Morrison reported seeing Richards photographing the Martinez home. Officer David Kim admitted being pressured for inside security protocols. And retired Captain William Hayes testified that a deputy chief tried to kill the Internal Affairs probe, warning of accidents for disloyal officers. Surveillance footage and Emma's precise car descriptions tied the same vehicles to repeated drive-bys. Richards' home office yielded chilling handwritten logs of Emma's routine, detailed like a kidnapping plan. The case files swelled from 3 binders to over a dozen. What began as corruption was now a federal probe into organized conspiracy, intimidation, and planned abduction of a judge's child. Ms. Rodriguez told reporters, "Emma Martinez's courage has revealed the full scope of this network. This was no isolated misconduct. It was a system of terror against an innocent family to obstruct justice." Emma knew little of the storm she'd unleashed. She still sat with Mrs. Chen and Ranger, drawing, but her presence became a talisman for prosecutors and honest officers. Federal agents quietly named the case Operation Guardian Angel in her honor. Meanwhile, at the defense table, panic replaced poise. Blake's control cracked. Richards hunched over notes, scribbling like a man building a wall around a wildfire. Even the youngest, Officer Morrison, looked trapped. In a closed-door meeting, Attorney Webb's voice rose loud enough for guards outside to hear. You promised your surveillance was undetectable. Now we have an 8-year-old who IDs your vehicles, your own logs, your phone records. How am I supposed to fight this?" Richard's reply was ice. "You're paid to make it disappear. Discredit the kid. Make Sullivan a rogue. I don't care how." But Webb saw the truth. This was no longer a winnable fight. In the gallery, Emma sketched Ranger in full uniform beside Officer Sullivan, her heroes. She leaned toward Mrs. Chen. "Why do those bad men keep looking at me like they're mad? I only told the truth." Mrs. Chen shifted to block their view. "Some people get angry when the truth makes their problems worse. You did the right thing." Ranger, sensing threat, repositioned himself between Emma and the defendants, ears tracking every movement. Sullivan, from the front row, recognized the heightened vigilance. The defense turned to character attacks, subpoenaing Sullivan's file, questioning Ranger's emotional stability, even filing motions to exclude Emma's testimony as unreliable due to age and attachment to the dog. The jury recoiled. Watching grown men in uniform try to tear down a child struck everyone as both desperate and indecent. Judge Martinez's rulings grew steelier, his tolerance for delay vanishing. Ms. Rodriguez of who was worth protecting. If Emma's testimony changed the trial, it also rewrote Officer Jake Sullivan's career. His unauthorized surveillance, once a potential career ender, was now a case study in moral courage. Internal Affairs moved quickly. Instead of censure, their report praised Sullivan and condemned the departmental failures that left the judge's family exposed. Requests for official protection had been denied, warnings ignored. Sullivan and Ranger had done the work of entire specialized units. Captain Morrison, who'd first asked for Sullivan's help, told the board he followed his conscience when the system failed. Emma asked her father one night, "Officer Sullivan isn't going to get in trouble, right? That would be unfair." Her father, speaking as dad, not judge, said, "Sometimes the right choice breaks the rules. This time, doing right is being honored." Honored indeed. The Fraternal Order of Police awarded Sullivan and Ranger their highest medal for valor. The FBI offered him a K-9 unit post. The police chief promoted him to sergeant to lead a new judicial and witness protection unit, formalizing the role he had improvised. Emma insisted on attending the ceremony, held in the same courthouse where she'd first recognized Ranger. Officers from across the country packed the room. At the podium, small but sure, Emma said, "Officers Sullivan and Ranger didn't protect my family because someone told them to. They did it because it was right. All police should be like them. Protect children even when it's hard or scary." The ovation lasted 5 minutes. Hardened cops blinked back tears. Ranger stayed in perfect form until Emma knelt after the ceremony, when he pressed his head into her hand, breaking his reserve. Sullivan, now Sergeant Sullivan, spoke last. "Emma taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what's right anyway. She showed it on the stand. Ranger showed it every night under that oak tree. I hope I showed it when I chose to act." A plaque was unveiled in the courthouse lobby, Emma and Ranger's photo, captioned, "In recognition of the courage shown by citizens great and small in the defense of justice and the protection of the innocent." As the Martinez family left, Ranger watched from Sullivan's side, eyes following the girl who had turned a quiet act of protection into a wave of justice that restored faith in the badge. The final day of the corruption trial dawned thick with tension. Even the air in the federal courthouse seemed to hum with it. Emma Martinez sat in her usual place in the gallery, Mr. Buttons beside her, hands folded neatly in her lap. Ranger rested at her feet, but his alertness was sharper than usual, eyes tracking every shift in the room. Taller. She knew now she was part of something much bigger. When Miss Rodriguez rose for closing arguments, she carried both confidence and gravity. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," her voice rang, "you've heard about corruption, intimidation, and conspiracy that strike at the heart of justice. You've heard about courage, officers who refused to participate in crime, a police dog and his handler who risked careers to protect an innocent family, and most remarkably, an 8-year-old girl who told the truth even when it was difficult and scary." Emma flushed as the prosecutor gestured toward her. She hadn't thought of herself as brave, she'd just told the truth about Ranger. But she was beginning to understand that sometimes refusing to be silent is the bravest thing of all. Miss Rodriguez methodically walked through the evidence sparked by Emma's first testimony. GPS logs placing the defendants near the Martinez home, surveillance footage matching Emma's frowny-face car, Richard's reconnaissance notes, and the testimony of officers emboldened to come forward. "They didn't just commit crimes," she said, voice tightening. "They weaponized their badges to terrorize a federal judge through threats against his family." When she turned to the bond between Emma and Ranger, her voice softened. Emma thought she'd befriended a stray. In truth, she'd met her guardian angel. And when she recognized him here in this courtroom, she didn't just greet a friend. She exposed a conspiracy. Attorney Webb's closing lacked fire. He tried to downplay the evidence, painting Emma as a confused child, and Officer Sullivan as a rogue cop who had fabricated threats. Even he seemed unconvinced. Emma's small fists clenched, but she stayed quiet, remembering her father's lessons on courtroom decorum. Judge Martinez delivered instructions with perfect clarity and neutrality, reminding jurors to decide only on evidence. Emma watched him set aside his role as her father to fulfill his duty as judge, and her admiration deepened. As the jury filed out, Emma leaned toward Mrs. Chen. "How long does it take?" "Hours, sometimes days," Mrs. Chen said. "But I think this jury won't need long." They waited in the cafeteria, Emma sketching to distract herself, until the buzzers signaled a verdict. Only 4 hours and 17 minutes later. As they returned through crowded halls, Emma glanced at Ranger. His calm steadied her. "I'm ready. The good guys are going to win." In court, the defendants looked worn and pale. The prosecutor's shoulders held quiet confidence. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" Judge Martinez asked. "We have," said the forewoman, holding a judge's family. Each one met with the same verdict. Emma didn't understand all the legal terms, but she understood guilty, and she watched the men at the defense table shrink with every word. Blake sagged in shock. Richard's hands shook. Morrison wiped his eyes. Applause erupted, rare in federal court, but unstoppable. Emma clapped too, Ranger's tail thumping beside her. "We won, Ranger! The good guys really won!" Judge Martinez called for order, set sentencing for 30 days, and had the convicted men led away in cuffs. Emma felt satisfaction mixed with a strange sadness for what they'd wasted. Officer Sullivan came to her. "Emma, this happened because you told the truth when it mattered. You and Ranger are heroes." "Does this mean bad police officers know they can't threaten families anymore?" she asked. "I think it means exactly that." 30 days later, courtroom 4A was full again for sentencing. Emma returned older in spirit, more aware of how justice worked. The pre-sentence reports were damning. Blake had a history of witness intimidation and bribe-taking. Richards had ties to organized crime. Even Morrison, youngest of the three, had willingly joined multiple conspiracies. Ms. Rodriguez urged maximum terms. "Their crimes strike at the foundation of our system. These sentences will send a message to law enforcement nationwide. This betrayal will not be tolerated." Then came the victim impact statements. Emma, prepared by Dr. Hernandez, stepped to the podium with Ranger beside her. The defendants were required to look at her. "My name is Emma Martinez and I'm 8 years old," she began. "These men scared my family because my daddy was doing his job. They made my parents worry about me and made me testify about things little kids shouldn't have to. But they didn't win. Good people protected us. I'm not scared anymore, because good people are stronger than bad people." She paused, meeting each man's eyes. "I hope they learn in prison that police officers should protect children, not scare them. And I hope they decide to help people instead of hurt them." The room was silent but for quiet sniffles. Even Morrison's head dropped. Richards couldn't meet her gaze. Judge Martinez imposed sentences that matched the crimes. 25 years for Blake, 30 for Richards, 15 for Morrison. "You used your badges as weapons against the innocent. These sentences reflect society's resolve that such betrayal will face full consequences." He looked out over the packed courtroom. "This case shows both our system's vulnerabilities and its strength. Corrupt individuals can threaten justice, but courage and truth can overcome even the most sophisticated conspiracy." Emma felt the truth of that. Family these crimes might have touched. She hugged him, then knelt to embrace Ranger. "Thank you for being my guardian angel. I'll never forget." Leaving the courthouse between her parents, Emma carried the lesson she'd earned, that even an 8-year-old and her dog can tip the scales toward justice. 3 weeks after the corruption case closed, 8-year-old Emma Martinez sat cross-legged in the Metropolitan Police Department's Conference Room B, sketchpad in her lap, listening as Officer, now Sergeant, Sullivan, introduced Ranger's new role. Both man and dog had transformed since their heroism was recognized, and Emma felt proud to have played a part in their rise, from near disgrace to departmental heroes. Ranger's performance during the Martinez family protection detail and his ability to connect with civilians, especially children, makes him perfect for our expanded community outreach program, Sullivan told the assembled officials. Ranger's work would now focus on schools, community centers, and events. Still ready for police duty, but primarily building trust. Police Chief Patricia Williams addressed Emma directly. "We'd like you involved. Your experience can help other children understand community safety and the role of police dogs." Emma lit up. "So I can help Ranger teach kids about police work, and that most officers really want to protect families?" "Exactly," Williams said. Emma's role was designed around her school schedule. She'd join Ranger and Sullivan at select events, telling her story in ways children could understand. Her first appearance was at Roosevelt Elementary, her own school, where hundreds of students packed the auditorium. "This is my friend Ranger," Emma began. "He's here to teach how police dogs keep neighborhoods safe." Ranger demonstrated narcotics detection, safe suspect apprehension, and flawless obedience. Emma translated the skills into lessons about courage. Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do the right thing, even when it's scary. Her classmates were captivated. When asked if she'd been scared during the corruption case, she admitted she had, but felt safe, knowing Ranger and Sullivan were watching over her. When bad things happen, there are always good people ready to help if you tell the truth. Teachers marveled at Emma's maturity and humility. She told her own teacher, "I hope kids understand they don't have to be scared of police officers. Most really want to help families stay safe." Media attention followed. On Channel 7's Community Heroes, Emma recalled leaving food for what she thought was a lonely dog, never guessing he was guarding her family. Even learning he was a police dog didn't change her love for him. She told viewers, "Most police officers are like Ranger and Sergeant Sullivan. They care about keeping families safe. The bad ones are unusual, and the good ones work hard to stop them." Invitations poured in for festivals, assemblies, and open houses. Surveys showed increased trust in police, where Emma and Ranger had appeared. More crimes were reported. Recruitment rose, with applicants citing their story as inspiration. Psychologist Maria Santos called Emma a trust ambassador, humanizing law enforcement for children. The work also gave Emma purpose, helping her process trauma. She'd become a poised public speaker, driven to protect others. Her parents watched proudly as their daughter grew in confidence and empathy. 6 months later, in the courthouse plaza where she'd first met Ranger, Emma was named his honorary junior handler. Wearing a junior police uniform and badge, she addressed the crowd. "When I met Ranger, I thought I was helping a hungry dog. I never imagined he was a hero protecting my family, or that our friendship would help catch bad guys and show people most police officers care about keeping kids safe." She demonstrated handling skills, commands, recalls, and safety protocols learned from Sullivan, showing the trust between her and Ranger. Asked if she wanted to be an officer, she replied, "I want to do whatever helps keep families safe. Maybe a judge, like my dad. Maybe a police officer. Maybe something else. But I'll always be one of the good guys." After the ceremony, Emma asked Sullivan if their work would stop bad officers from hurting families. "I think you and Ranger are showing people what good police work looks like," he said. "When kids grow up trusting law enforcement, it's harder for bad officers to hide." Before leaving, Emma hugged Ranger. "Thank you for being my guardian angel," she whispered. He nuzzled her cheek, tail wagging. The day marked not an ending, but a beginning. Two partners, continuing to build trust between police and the public, proving that courage and kindness are stronger than fear and corruption. The morning sun streamed through the windows of the Metropolitan Police Department's Canine Training Facility as 9-year-old Emma Martinez walked the familiar corridors with the confident stride of someone who had found her calling. Her weekly visits with Ranger had grown from simple demonstrations into a nationwide model for how law enforcement approached community relations and judicial protection. Carrying a small briefcase her father had given her for her birthday, Emma kept meticulous training schedules and notes on new canine units being prepared for family protection. What began as a desperate effort to guard one threatened family was now federal policy in multiple districts. "Morning, Emma," called Sergeant Sullivan from the yard, where a young German shepherd named Justice trained for a Agencies learned that protection meant more than guards and barriers. It required emotional reassurance, especially for kids. Her child-friendly protocols, inspired by her own case, reduced trauma while maintaining safety. She told a group of new handlers, Kids under protection are scared, even if they hide it. They need to feel the officers and dogs are their friends. When Ranger protected my family, I felt safest knowing he cared about me, not just the assignment. The reforms, known as the Martinez Protocol, closed dangerous gaps in courthouse security. Judge Martinez often watched his daughter train officers, proud she'd turned a frightening chapter into something that protected others. Emma explained to him one evening, "When bad things happen, you can let them make you angry or use them to help others. I chose to help, because that's what Ranger would do." Her role expanded into community policing. She taught visiting students that police dogs are four-legged officers who dedicate their lives to protecting people they don't even know. Exactly a year after her first courthouse visit, the new $2.3 million Judicial Security Wing was dedicated in her and Ranger's honor. On the steps, she stood in a navy dress beside Ranger, now the courthouse's official community relations ambassador. Chief Williams announced, "We honor two heroes whose courage exposed corruption, strengthened security, and restored faith in justice." In her speech, Emma said, "Ranger taught me courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about caring so much that you'll face fear to keep others safe." He followed his heart, protecting families from those who would harm them. She urged other children to tell the truth if something bad happened, assuring them officers and dogs like Ranger were on their side. Sullivan followed, saying, "Emma showed me real heroism can come from the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the strongest weapon against corruption is a child's honest voice." The ceremony concluded with the unveiling of a bronze statue of Emma and Ranger. The inscription read, "In honor of Emma Martinez and Canine Ranger, whose courage and loyalty proved that justice finds its greatest strength in the bond between those who protect and those who are protected." Later, Emma sat on the courthouse steps with Ranger, pondering aloud, "Do you think we really changed things?" Judge Martinez joined her, reminding her that while individual courage matters, it's most powerful when it inspires others. "I think we helped people remember we're all supposed to be on the same side," Emma reflected. Sullivan arrived with news. 3 more federal districts were adopting their protocols. Ranger were honored for doing the right thing. Before leaving, she hugged Ranger and whispered, "Thank you for teaching me that the best courage comes from caring about others more than your own comfort." Ranger pressed against her, their silent bond unbroken. As they walked away, Emma told her father, "Justice doesn't protect itself. It needs people willing to stand up, even when scared. Heroes come in all sizes, even little girls and police dogs." The bronze would weather. The wing would become routine, but their legacy, trust, courage, and the reminder that light can shine from unexpected places would live on in the hearts of those they inspired. Emma and Ranger's story reminds us of something we dog lovers know deep in our souls, that the bond between humans and dogs transcends ordinary friendship. German shepherds, with their noble hearts and unwavering loyalty, seem especially gifted at understanding when we need protection, comfort, or simply a faithful companion who sees the best in us. There's something magical about the way dogs choose to love us unconditionally, isn't there? They don't judge our mistakes or hold grudges. They just believe in us, the way Ranger believed in Emma's goodness, and Emma trusted in his protection. If you've been blessed with a dog in your life, you know these connections can run soul deep. Sometimes I think about how much richer these bonds could become if we understood our four-legged friends even better, their signals, their needs, the way they see the world. If you'd ever like to explore ways to strengthen that special connection with your own companion, I'd be happy to share something that's helped many dog families I know. Just give us a call when you're ready. Your dog is already perfect. Sometimes we just need help becoming the human they deserve.